Is that really him? The whisper cut through the soft murmur of the first-class cabin like a knife. Heads turned, phones discreetly rose. Some passengers tried to act casual, but their eyes betrayed them. There, quietly stepping into seat 2A of the luxury jet bound from Los Angeles to New York, was Tom Brady. Dressed in a simple navy sweater, grey joggers and white sneakers, he looked like any relaxed traveler. No entourage, no flashy gear, just Tom, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, a copy of The Alchemist in hand. But anonymity was impossible. The 7-time Super Bowl champion couldn't walk into a Starbucks unnoticed, let alone board a transcontinental luxury flight. He gave a small nod to a flight attendant who smiled, probably more nervous than he was. But before he could even settle in, the tension hit. A man, mid-50s, seated in 2B, the seat beside Brady, let out an exaggerated sigh. He wasn't subtle. Gold Rolex, salmon polo, shoes polished like glass. The kind of guy who wanted everyone to know he was someone. "Oh great," the man muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Thought I was flying with business elites, not retired quarterbacks with something to prove." Tom paused mid-movement, bag still in hand. The man didn't stop. "You know, I paid for this seat to avoid screaming fans and sports gossip, not to sit next to some washed-up celebrity." No one said a word. The nearby row went quiet, a bubble of discomfort spreading fast. A woman 2 rows up shifted uncomfortably. The man across the aisle raised an eyebrow. A steward lingered nearby, uncertain whether to intervene. Brady, still standing, slowly lowered his bag and placed it gently in the overhead compartment. He turned, looked the man in the eyes, and smiled. "Good news, then," Tom said calmly. "I'm not here to impress you." He sat down. No drama, no raised voice, no PR-trained clapback, just that. A quiet sentence that deflated the tension in the cabin like air hissing from a balloon. The man scoffed, clearly caught off guard. "I'm just saying, some of us don't care about your rings or your documentaries. This is a place for people who actually work." That one landed like a punch. Brady opened his book. He didn't respond. A beat passed. Then 2. The man looked around, searching for some nod of agreement. A chuckle. Anything. Instead, silence. Everyone else had either gone back to pretending they weren't eavesdropping, or they were flat out staring. The plane hadn't even left the gate, and already the air inside felt thinner, hotter. But Tom... Stillness. He turned a page. The flight attendant returned, trying to break the awkwardness. "Can I offer either of you a welcome drink?" Tom looked up. "Still water, please, thank you." The man grumbled. "Scotch, neat." She nodded and walked away. Brady closed his book slightly, as if marking a pause, then turned, not confrontational but curious. "You ever think," he asked softly, "that people's worst moments often happen when they think no one will remember them?" The man blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" Tom shrugged. "Just an observation." He turned back to his book. And in that instant, the cabin collectively realized something. The guy next to Brady might have just embarrassed himself in front of the most composed man on the plane. But the story, it was only getting started. To find out how this tension escalates, and the surprising twist that will leave the whole cabin stunned, stick around. And hey, if you're loving this story, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss what happens next. The plane had leveled off, cruising smoothly above the Midwest. The hum of the engines filled the silence in first class, broken occasionally by the soft clink of glasses or a cough muffled behind a napkin. Yet in seat 2B, the man who had insulted Tom Brady still fidgeted with the cuff of his shirt, like he was trying to scrub the moment from memory. Tom hadn't said a word since takeoff. He sipped his water, eyes on the pages of his book, calm as still water. But the cabin hadn't forgotten. 2 rows behind, a younger man in a suit whispered to his colleague, "Can you believe that guy? Who talks to Tom Brady like that?" "Some people just need attention," the colleague replied, tapping away on a tablet. Brady handled it like a monk. But the real shift in mood happened when turbulence hit. Sudden, sharp. The plane jolted. Drinks rattled on trays. A gasp escaped from several passengers, followed by a nervous laugh from someone trying to play it cool. Tom calmly folded his book closed and looked toward the aisle. The man in 2B, already tense, reached for his armrest with a death grip. "Relax," Tom said, voice low and steady. "Just a pocket of air." The man didn't answer. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered a bit of unexpected turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Another jolt rocked the cabin, more severe this time. Somewhere in economy, a child cried out. Flight attendants moved quickly, securing carts and checking on passengers. One of them, Lauren, approached Tom and the man beside him. She wore a composed smile, but her eyes scanned the cabin with urgency. "Everything all right here?" she asked, steadying herself on a seat back. Tom nodded. "We're good." The man gave a tight-lipped grunt. "This airline better get their act together." Tom glanced at him. "You've flown before, right?" The man turned, bristling. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Means this isn't unusual," Tom replied, tone flat. "The sky isn't always smooth." A silence hung in the air. Then, another jolt, the strongest yet. A tray slipped somewhere. Someone shouted. A flight attendant stumbled but caught herself. This time it was Brady who reached out, steadying Lauren by the elbow without hesitation. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, grateful. "Yes, thank you, Mr. Brady." For the first time, the man in 2B looked at Tom with something other than annoyance. There was a flicker of confusion, maybe even respect. When the turbulence finally eased, the cabin sighed as one. Conversations resumed, shakier now, but present. The worst had passed. Tom leaned back into his seat. He noticed something. A kid, maybe 12, had walked up timidly from further back in the cabin, nervous, holding a small notepad. Tom smiled warmly. "Hey there." "Hi," the boy said, barely above a whisper. "Sorry, I really admire you. Could I get your autograph?" Brady took the pad and pen, signed it carefully, then handed it back. "What's your name?" "Jalen." "Well, Jalen," Tom said, "you've got a steady hand coming up here mid-air like that." Jalen grinned. "I want to be a quarterback too." Tom gave him a fist bump. "Keep showing up." That's the secret. As Jalen returned to his seat, the entire front section of the cabin had witnessed it, quietly, respectfully. In 2B, the man didn't say anything, but he'd seen it too, and the air between them had shifted, just slightly. Somewhere over Ohio, the cabin lights were dimmed for rest. Most of the passengers had reclined their seats, headphones on, faces lit only by the occasional flicker of a movie screen. But in seat 2B, the man who had insulted Tom Brady remained wide awake, arms crossed, foot tapping restlessly. Tom hadn't said much since the turbulence passed. He'd quietly helped another passenger retrieve a spilled bag, offered his snack to a little girl who had dropped hers, and nodded politely when someone whispered a quiet, "Thank you for everything," while heading to the restroom. But 2B wasn't done. He turned toward Tom suddenly, voice lower this time. "You know, I wasn't always like this." Tom didn't look up right away. He let the moment settle, sensing it was different from the last. Then he closed his book again. "I figured," he said. The man exhaled through his nose, not quite a sigh, more like the pressure release of something that had been building. "My name's Richard Kinlan. Used to be managing partner at one of the biggest law firms in New York." Tom nodded. "Tough job." "Yeah, well, I retired last year, not because I wanted to. Cancer. Beat it once, then it came back. I got lucky again, but the firm didn't want to wait for a third round." A beat passed. "Sorry to hear that," Tom said. Richard glanced out the window, then back. "I don't know why I went after you like that. I saw you walk on the plane and something just triggered me. All that success. The spotlight, the applause, I guess I hated you for it, for still having it." Tom leaned back, thoughtful. "Truth is, I miss it too sometimes. The structure, the pressure, walking into a stadium and knowing what I'm there to do." Richard studied him. "I always imagined guys like you would never feel that." Tom smiled faintly. Most people don't retire because they want to. They do it because they have to. The body, the business, the clock, something makes the decision for you. Richard let that settle. Yeah, that's how it felt for me. One day I'm leading boardrooms, next I'm sitting in a cancer center being told to manage stress better. What the hell does that even mean? Tom chuckled softly. It means you finally have time to ask yourself who you are when no one's watching. Richard looked down at his hands. They trembled slightly. I don't think I like that version. There was silence. Then Tom said, maybe that version just hasn't been given a real chance yet. They sat like that for a few minutes. No performance, no posturing, just two men no longer trying to prove anything in that moment. Eventually, a flight attendant passed by with a tray of warm towels. Richard accepted one, pressed it to his face. When he pulled it away, his voice was quieter. You know my grandson's obsessed with you, posters, jerseys, everything. Tom turned. How old? 10. He's had a rough year with my treatments. My daughter says he's been more anxious, withdrawn. Tell him he's not alone, Tom said. Even quarterbacks have bad years. Richard chuckled, then paused. Would you maybe write him something? Tom nodded, reached for his notebook, and tore out a page. He wrote slowly, thoughtfully, then handed it over. To Jacob, stay strong, be kind, your story's just beginning. Tom Brady. Richard blinked fast, lips pressed tight. Thank you. Tom gave a small nod. We're all just trying to hold it together, man. And for the first time since they boarded, the man in 2B didn't feel the need to be anyone else. As dawn crept in through the cabin windows, streaks of soft orange light painted the leather seats and sleeping faces with a fragile calm. The flight was approaching its final stretch into New York, and one by one, passengers began to stir. Tom Brady sat upright, eyes closed, but not asleep. His breathing was steady, a kind of practiced stillness that came not from meditation, but from years of focus, of knowing how to be still in chaos. In seat 2B, Richard Kinlan had changed. He hadn't touched another drink. His posture had relaxed. The scowl he wore like armor was gone, replaced with something more human, more vulnerable. The note to his grandson rested gently on his lap, as if it weighed more than it looked. Tom, he said suddenly, breaking the morning quiet. Brady opened his eyes. I don't know how you do it. The patience, the calm, everyone wanting a piece of you. Tom considered it. It's not always calm. I've just learned when it's worth fighting and when it's not. Richard nodded slowly. I fought everything, even when I didn't need to. Further down the aisle, the kid from earlier, Jalen, but passed by again, heading for the restroom. He gave Tom a shy smile. Tom gave him a little thumbs up. That one simple gesture made Jalen beam. A woman in business attire across the aisle, who had witnessed the early conflict, leaned over slightly and whispered, You handled him with grace. Not many would have. Tom didn't respond with pride. He just gave her a polite nod and returned his gaze to the window. It was the kind of moment no one would write about in the news. No cameras, no crowd, just people on a plane, slowly realizing that sometimes the most powerful responses don't need volume. They need presence. As breakfast trays were passed out, more passengers began to make eye contact with Brady. Subtle smiles, muted thank yous, small acknowledgements that they'd seen what happened, that respect doesn't always look like applause. Sometimes it's just silent gratitude. The flight attendant, Lauren, stopped by one last time, just wanted to say, I've worked 100 celebrity flights. Yours will be the one I remember. Tom smiled. Hope that's a good thing. She grinned. Best kind. He looked over at Richard, who now seemed deep in thought. The kind of thought that comes when a man realizes he's spent too much time performing and not enough just being. You've still got time, Tom said quietly to him. Don't let a bad season make you believe the game's over. Richard turned toward him. I've spent my whole life acting like I already knew everything. Then maybe the next part, Tom replied, is about listening. The captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing descent into JFK. Passengers fastened their seatbelts, adjusted their seats, and prepared to re-enter their lives. As the wheels touched down with a soft bounce, the energy in the cabin had shifted. People weren't just passengers anymore. They were witnesses to something that started with arrogance and ended with humility. Tom stood to grab his bag. Richard remained seated a moment longer, then extended his hand. "Thank you," he said. "Not just for being who they think you are, but for being who you are when no one's watching." Tom shook his hand firmly. "You take care of that grandson." "I will." And just like that, the man who boarded with bitterness walked off with something else entirely: clarity. Tom stepped into the jet bridge not as a celebrity, but as someone who had quietly changed a man's life at 36,000 feet. Tom Brady stepped into the terminal at JFK with the same quiet grace he had shown throughout the flight. The buzz of arriving passengers surrounded him, rolling suitcases, announcements over the PA, the distant hum of espresso machines at a nearby cafe. But for the people from that first-class cabin, the real noise was still internal, the echo of what they'd just witnessed. Behind him, Richard Kinlan walked more slowly. He was different now, not because Tom had lectured him or tried to fix him, but because someone had finally responded to his bitterness with empathy instead of ego. He carried the note to his grandson like it was a contract signed in gold. "Hey, Tom," Richard called out just before they split toward different gates. Tom turned. "So I'm going to try," Richard said. "I mean it. The version of me that hasn't had a chance, maybe it's time he showed up." Tom smiled, offered a hand one last time. "Let him." They shook, and just like that, they parted ways. Tom moved through the terminal with practiced ease, baseball cap low, headphones slung around his neck. But one more moment waited for him before he disappeared into the city. Near baggage claim, a woman approached him. Elena Torres, the mom from seat 4C. Her son, Jalen, was beside her again, gripping the notepad with the signature. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said, almost breathless. "You didn't just sign something. You made him feel seen." Jalen looked up. "I'm going to play quarterback one day." Tom crouched down to eye level. "You don't need to play like me," he said. "You just need to play like you, that's enough." Jalen nodded, determination in his small face, and then with a final wave, Tom walked out. Not into a limo, not into cameras, just into the street, blending into the rhythm of New York like any other early morning traveler. But the echoes of that flight remained behind. Lauren, the flight attendant, would later retell the story to friends at a dinner party. You wouldn't believe how he handled it. No ego, no scene, just quiet dignity. Jalen would frame the autograph. His mum would use that flight as an example every time he doubted himself. And Richard Kinlan, he would go home, call his daughter and tell her he wanted to be more involved. He'd asked to visit Jacob that weekend, and when he saw his grandson, he would hand him the note. For the first time in a long while, he wouldn't feel the need to control the conversation. He'd just sit and listen, not because Tom Brady gave him advice, but because Tom Brady showed him what control really looked like. Not dominance, but restraint. Not power, but purpose. It wasn't the flight Richard expected, but it was exactly the one he needed. And if this story moved you even a little, if you believe the smallest moments can carry the biggest impact, don't forget to subscribe. We've got more real-life stories that speak louder than headlines. Click the video on your screen now to keep watching. The next one might change the way you see everything.